Namaste and in La Catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest, I can say, is a friend and possibly even a good friend, Carey Corr. He is a film director and screenwriter. He's the CEO of Connected Pictures. Isn't that a cool name? He's also the chief of cinematography for the Octopus movement, which is where we met as founding members. We've also been participating in what's known as the Friendship Bench, which is hosted by Biz Catalyst 360. And if you don't know what that is, look it up, join it. You'll love the conversations and the people there as they're supportive of reimagining humanity as it can be in its best ways. And that's about personal growth too, right? So, Carey, so glad to hear you and so glad to be here now.
Yeah, me too, Zen. It's always great to talk to you.
You
I
know, it's
love you
funny.
like a brother.
I'm sorry. That was just that came out that I've never said things that way, but it dawned on me that, namaste and in la catch. That's, the divine in me recognizes the divine in you, and in la catch is I am another you. So, it's funny how we think we make those slips in speech that are so appropriate and poignant, and then we make fun of them.
Love that. Yeah, it's my philosophy too, but I use different words. I'm a slice of the great oneness, and you and I are part of the great oneness, so we're the same thing. We're our unique slice, but we're the same thing.
And a lot of what we share is helping to bring out those inner conversations and that inner awareness, the connections, the inspired activity in life that only comes from within. And I know from your shorts that I've seen and the work that you do, the conversations that we've had, you're that kind of guy, right? So how did you first begin that? Most of my guests have had some kind of an inner experience that they didn't really share with others for quite some time, and yet it was really relevant to them in their own personal and spiritual development. When did yours start and how?
Mine started when I was very, very young. For some, well, not for some reason, for the divine reason in me, truth was always really important to me. And so if I saw something that didn't resonate as truth to me, I would say it. And this obviously could cause some problems, and did, in my household and in school. And so I tucked those things away. I masked it all because a lot of us in the Octopus movement can do a lot of things, and we can do this. So school was always very easy for me. So instead of bringing up the big topics like I did and got in trouble for doing that, I just did what they asked me, quickly, easily, and pretended I was this and that. And
Sure.
but that caused me personally and a lot of problems. It was the same with my parents as well, although they accepted my big thoughts. But my father, at times when he didn't like truth pointing, we had problems. So there was conflict, although they allowed me. It was a very weird.
And oftentimes the non-linear thinkers like us that have that sensitivity and resonance early on, and we speak our feelings, we can tend to be outcast and unaccepted. And so we diminish ourselves thinking that we don't fit, when in actuality, we probably fit better. And, you mentioned the Octopus movement and how we came together. For those of you who haven't heard about the Octopus movement yet, it is a collection of non-linear thinkers that spans the gamut of diversity and inclusion, and also brings those folks together to help create ways to help each other and the world in positive ways of change, which is, to me, that's a really cool place to hang out and cool people to be with.
Yeah, me too. And I think maybe I've told you this, but I didn't even until I joined the movement, I didn't really even recognize that there were others like me. Like I understood the concept, but I had no direct contact with them.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I
So as a
always,
kid, that would probably be, you know, because we are a little bit older now, right? So as a kid, how did that transpire? What were the kinds of things that you had to work through and the ways in which you did it to maintain your own sanity?
so there was a lot of stuff. And I'm grateful for being, in some ways polymathic, and that I did a lot of stuff so I could kind of find some places, even though that wasn't the full me that I
Hmm.
was comfortable. There was a lot of places. I did a lot of sports. I did, and I was a very small guy, and I was kind of an angry young kid, and like people were a little just like afraid of me, even though I was young, because I mean small and younger than everyone in my school. I was a year younger than everyone in, because my parents put me in a private school before I started kindergarten and sent me through to first grade because they thought that that would be good for me. And so
Mm.
when I entered the public school, I was a year younger, and I was small. So like I
So
was
you learned
double.
to define boundaries early. Hmm.
Yeah, I didn't
Maybe not
have
in
a
the
lot
best
of,
ways, but
yeah, in the worst ways. Yes, exactly. But one of my big coping mechanisms, and what led me to, or kept me in touch with my authentic self, was movies. And movies were a place where I could see that there was other people out there who maybe not the same thing as me, but were in engulfed in a world they couldn't understand. You know, you see that in
Mhm.
movies with characters. And so as a kid, I was very young. I was like 9 or 10. My parents bought a new TV for downstairs, and they stuck the TV in my room because I would have insomnia. So I would maybe fall asleep at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, but I'd be up like clockwork at like 11 midnight. I don't know, something. So when they did that, I shared a room with my brother, but he could sleep through anything. So I would turn on the TV and watch B movies, you know, these
Right.
black and whites, until the television screen had the little numbers
Either
and
the snow or the bars,
the
right?
snow or the bars, right? Exactly, until it turned off, right? And then somehow I fell asleep and I'd get up early. But I was watching all these B movies in black and white, and even though that wouldn't have been the kind of movie I liked, it just, the
It was still a
characters,
tremendous education.
yeah, it was a great education, and it was a sense that in art
Mhm.
there was salvation for me. Like there may be a way, even though
Beautifully put.
I did not pursue it in school. I didn't really, I
Mhm.
drew a little, you know, like because I
Well, did you
masked.
really have that sense, right? Or you just felt like, you know, because I know as kids, we don't have that intellectual capacity oftentimes to unpack things to that level. Yet it feels comfortable. We feel at least embraced for a little bit, and we're able to explore ourselves in relationship to the content that we're viewing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. The other part was I had a yearning for some of that stuff, but I did realize for me in that situation, or the situation I was in as a kid, like that would have been too difficult to do. It wouldn't have happened, you know, like it just
Mhm.
wouldn't have. I, my parents were oddly, like I said, supportive of all that I wanted to do, but sometimes there was just so much going on that a new thing wasn't going to be
Mhm.
that thing. And so I, you know, and then I just sort of kept it in my pocket in a way, and masked, and just went about things and
I'm totally
continued
hip.
on.
That's
Yeah.
a very similar thing for me too. Little different way in. Um, I found out I was adopted at 4.5 when they brought my sister home. Beautiful little girl, and I've got a picture of me holding her that
Mm.
I still have today. Uh, but when they brought her home, they thought it was time for me to know about being adopted, and so they told me, and you know, I never had any questions about whether they loved me or not. You know, it brought up, okay, who was my biologicals and why and those kinds of normal questions, but I didn't really hold on to those. Where I ended up was, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them? And for a 4.5-year-old, it's like, huh? Right?
Yeah.
But that was my takeaway question from all of that. And it turned out shortly thereafter, a voice shows up one night. I've got my elbows in the windowsill and my chin on my hands, looking out over the front porch at night. Porch light was on. Mom was watching TV at the bottom of the stairs, 10, 15 feet away. All of a sudden, I hear this, "Hey, you." And it was so deep, so resonant, so powerful, and yet so soft. And instantly it startled me. And I spun around instead of questioning and trying to talk to it, right? "Hey, you, what, you mean me?" No, didn't do that. I spun around and I asked her if she could hear it. And Mom says, "Nope, I didn't hear any voice. Must have been a peeping Tom." And I went, huh? Right? So you realize at that, or I did at that moment, that I could not deny my experience because I know what I heard, and yet she didn't either. So there was something different because it was loud enough. If it would have been an exterior voice, she would have heard it. So then I, stand in front of windows at night with the lights on inside and not be able to see outside. And I would project that voice out, hoping for a return, trying to, it's like, oh shit, I forgot. Right. You contacted me. Let's have a conversation. Right.
Right.
And, I don't know why I did this. It was just, it wasn't until I got to a place where I stopped thinking one night. Because, you're thinking about getting something to happen. And so you're constantly rolling those thoughts through your head. Well, I shut up finally. And guess what? The voice returned.
Mm.
So it gave me the opportunity. And yet still, like you say, who am I going to talk to about that?
Right. Yeah. And even though I didn't have a voice, I had these feelings inside of me. This divine truth is the way I like to look at it. And it was just coming out, and I realized every time I speak this, I'm a problem for a lot of people, and so
You heretic, you.
right, exactly. And so the odd thing about it for me was that I'm pretty sure my dad understood it very clearly, but because his conditioning, and there was a lot of stuff. So I don't want to, there's nothing.
He was afraid for you.
Maybe that, but more, I think he was afraid that he had that same stuff too. So I'm just realizing
Could
that my
be.
father was very intuitive too, but it was probably even less allowed in his generation and the experiences he went through. Because my father was he was old for me. He was an older father. There's same parents, but there's a gap between my brother and sister who are like 7 years older than me, and and then my younger brother and he's 2 years younger. But there was a gap because my father was a World War II guy. He was born in 1919.
Right.
He married my mother after the war in the 50s, and he was going to school. He hadn't gone to school. He was in the Air Force. And then so he went to school, and then he had graduated college, and they had my brother and sister. Then he decided to go to medical school. So there was this big pause while he was going to school.
That's a huge commitment.
Right. Yeah. So but I feel like he did have these moments, but it just it's scared him. I could see it in him.
Yeah.
Scared him that not
Mine was
only
the same way.
yeah, that I was like that, but he was like that, and I could see his fear, and I would try to be the one who say it's fine, that stuff.
Yeah.
This is yeah.
I didn't get so much the fear from Dad, Piscean as well. So, he had that water depth. He was also a 32nd degree Mason. And he would, whenever I talked to him about the spiritual stuff, especially after my teenage years, he would just vehemently shut me down.
Mm.
And then at because my talk got me institutionalized at 19, right? The same thing you were saying, your truth telling. I went, the competency hearing, I spoke my truth and it didn't fit. So, and it wasn't crazy. I wasn't, um, so, which was just kind of bizarre. At any rate, he thought that at 82, finally, we have a conversation one day sitting in the parking lot at the golf course that had just closed right next to the first tee. It was one of our favorite hangout spots when I was growing up. And he says to me, I understand you. I was just scared to death. You would open your mouth up in the wrong place and they'd put you away. And and my response was, Dad, I've been in Phoenix for 35 years. I'm still free. I think I made it. Right. But I longed for those deep, relevant conversations with him that I was never able to have.
That's so funny how similar you and I are, because that's
You
the
think?
exact thing. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, but like, I mean, how similar our experience with our father is. It was exactly that with and I would have some to a point, and then that was it.
Yep.
And
Oh, yeah, he had great wisdom and
Oh,
guidance and taught me wonderful values and ethics and morals. And, I couldn't have had any better instructions. He wanted me to get into the lodge. I opted out and I went into DMLA early, got the instruction there, and then said, oh, okay, this is what it's about. Moving on.
Yeah, so then similar to my father, I think he taught me so very much, but it was more on the intellectual side. He didn't really want to get it emotionally and talking about any kind of thing about spirituality or whatever was even really going on in me. Like, you're hearing truth, that's okay, you know what I mean? He was not capable of doing that for whatever reason.
Let me clarify. Let's unpack what you mean by hearing truth here. And this, I'm going to give you for instance and see if that resonates with you.
Sure.
So truth in the speaking of it isn't necessarily person directed. It's about integrity of the moment. Would you say that's correct?
That's exactly what it was. That's a beautiful way to put it. And that's exactly what would happen to me. I would be in a moment, see the things going on,
call them out,
and be punished. And I mean, and that was the cycle I lived in. But the thing was, and this was part of, and I love it because it added to a complexity of my understanding, which I can bring to my work, is I didn't always get punished by my father. So there were times where he would just go, oh, that's a really brilliant insight. You're really, really smart. But then there were the times, and it could be the exact
life, right?
Yeah, it's life, but it was, it is life, but also it could be almost a repeat.
It could be very different. Absolutely.
Situation, and then there would, and it would be bad for me, so.
Now it brings up a great point. We're similar in age. I'm 66, you're 61. Our parents were of the same generation, and their behaviors of that generation are very similar. Keep the inner stuff quiet. Now, my reason for starting this up to begin with is to bring those inner conversations out to the light, right? Let's talk about these things. We live half inside, half outside. We're bereft of understanding, exploring, expressing, sharing stories of our inner experiences and how they reflect in the outer world. Well, if we ever expect to establish any kind of harmony or order in society and the world as we evolve as a planetary civilization, wouldn't you think those conversations would be important?
Yes, and that's what I thought when I was a kid. So I said them. But
Me too.
Yeah, right. So you and I know that. And I agree 100%. that's how I'm living. You know, that's how I'm living now. I'm living that way. I want to pursue those conversations, and in my work, I want to pursue them in a way that can use a medium like film to create them in a way that's digestible for a lot of people, because I have that ability and talent. So to make just a movie that the stuff's there, but it's only seen by those who see. It's not a focused thing. It's not a, this is
Well, the
exactly
subtle
how
things,
it,
right? We learn, especially once you start perceiving from a different perspective, right? Because they say perception's reality, and yeah, it is. It depends on your perspective as to what kind of reality you're going to create or see, right? So if your perspective is different and you're able to have a life full of joy and happiness, wouldn't you want to share that with others? Because that's kind of what comes natural with it. Now, how do we do that, right? Like we were talking on the bench yesterday about self-love, right? How do we look at, okay, where am I in my own way? What did you discover as you were evolving in your teens and 20s and in that crucial period where you were finding out, more about how the world works and fitting into it functionally? Because I think
yeah,
you and I both kind of
yeah.
had the same
I
experience.
don't.
We had to figure out how to fit functionally, right?
Yeah. So the it's 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 very complex for me now that I can look back on it. It is that at a lot of times I didn't fit in functionally, and then other times I was masking and doing stuff. So I got very into, like, I was drinking and using drugs
Mm.
and all that stuff. I understand it was because I couldn't reconcile my insides to what
But
I
you had
was.
to numb the inside in order to deal with the outside.
Right, exactly. So the outside, but the very interesting thing for me was I actually knew that whilst I was doing it, and it was
Don't you think we all do?
I think maybe
Down
we have a
deep, and
sense of it,
yet
but like I
it's so
even had,
painful to live in the outer world that we still
yeah,
do it.
yeah, I believe that everyone has that feeling in them, but it was very strong for me to the point where it was guiding me to say, like, come on, you know what I mean? Like, right now you don't have to take that next step in this moment in that direction.
Mhm.
And so I mean, and so what I came to with that is that this masking thing that I was doing, I took to the hilt. I really masked. I masked using drugs. I masked the way I looked. I masked everything to try to fit in, but not fit in, to be a rebel, to be, all of this. I mean, and I still am.
You're
I,
being a
I,
rebel and still wanting to belong, right? How do you
exactly.
work that out?
Right, exactly. So, and interestingly enough, not really, wink, wink, I was drawn to the punk rock movement when it first came out in the 70s, because it was the first time I heard people talking about truth and not caring what anyone thought about it.
Mhm.
And so, like, I was like, oh, okay, this is for me, even though I couldn't quite do that, but like I could see in it the power of it, and I could hear it in the music, and so I still, like, feel like there's a part of me that opened up at that time, this
Mhm.
punk
Was there a
rock. And
particular piece of music that you would epitomize of that kind of
yeah,
sang your song?
yeah, it was the Clash and their record London Calling. So I'll give you exactly how it played out for me. So I was 17. I had graduated high school already. My friends were all older than me. So I had some friends who were a couple years in school older than me, but I was friends with them. And some guy and people my age or my grade, I should say, were older. And so like I was going to school, but I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So a few of us moved to Mammoth, California to work at the ski lodge and to like that. And I knew this was not something that was probably for me to really do. I mean, I skied, I had fun, but like I was stuck with these guys, and the ones who weren't already 21 had fake IDs and looked older than me. I looked like I was like 12 when I was 17, you know. So like
yeah, that raised an eyebrow or two, wouldn't it?
yeah, I had nothing to do, right? With like
Right.
they're all going and like, and we would try to sneak me into the bars, and I get kicked out of, you know, I mean, and so I sat around by myself listening. The record had just come to America, and I put that on, and there's not a song on it that wasn't talking to me, and it was talking to me because it was asking for change in the world.
Mm.
And I understood that deeply from a personal perspective and from the idea that people are not going to have to mask like I am if we listen to what these guys are saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it wasn't just them. I mean, there was
no,
that
yeah.
whole era from probably 73 to what, 82 maybe,
Right,
83.
81, maybe. Yeah,
There
3
were
maybe,
just
yeah.
so many.
Right. There was so many, but that was what kicked to me.
It probably started before that, back in the Love generation, right? Which we were wannabe hippies, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, so the thing is with that is I didn't, you know, of course I'm in this world. I'm going about it the way I am. At that point it resonated with me, but it didn't change anything for me for a long time.
Yeah.
And I just kept that stuff, and I maybe in my mid-20s, I mean, I had done a bunch of stuff. I went to school. You know what we do? A lot of stuff.
Right.
A lot of stuff.
Right. It's like, oh,
you
can
know,
I do that? I don't know. Let's go try. Right.
right. And you're good at it, and then you do
Yeah.
it, and then you're like, this
And then you get bored.
right? And I was always in school and always learning on my own, and you know, and movies and music and the whole thing.
Mhm.
And so I had this revelation. I like this story because it shows how, for me inside, there's a sense of purity, like my authentic self. A
Right.
sense of purity, and naivete comes with some of that. I didn't put into my head till I'm 23 or 4.
Naivety and innocence allows us to be curious.
Right. So I did not understand the concept. I loved movies. I grew up, the one common bond my father and I always had was movies, because their generation,
Mhm.
that was everything, right? He grew up from the time there were movies, the silence, to is, you know, right through the war. It took everybody, you know, they were the power media of that time, and so influential. He took me all over. I grew up outside of LA. I mean, we were at Grauman's, we were at all the, you know, I mean, we went to movies, and
Mhm. I lived right around the corner from Grumman's for a little bit over on Hawthorne.
oh, right, there you go, right there, yeah. Yeah, so all of that stuff was part of my life, and for some reason, it did not dawn on me till I was like 23 in a real way. You know, just people make those movies.
Mhm.
Like, I just, like,
Highly skilled people.
right, but in my mind prior to that, I must have thought not so much highly skilled as special, and
Yeah.
that not attainable for anybody or for me. And there was that separation just went away. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, you can
Well,
do this.
yeah, it's like you're asking, well, how do they do that? I don't know. Oh my gosh. And then there's this awe.
Right.
And then you get curious and you get interested and you figure it out. And it's like, oh, I can do that too. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And also for me, there was always this part of me that was drawn to art and music, and in a way that none of the people around me had
Hmm.
an understanding of it. It didn't resonate in them like it did with me. And I was fortunate enough as a kid to get to go to New York a few times and see Broadway plays and just be moved by what's happening and what they're trying to say and all that stuff. But it took me till I was 23 to realize, oh yeah, somebody does that. And a lot of what runs through you could probably apply to that.
Hmm.
And so then I started studying. I actually studied film studies, not the production based way that a lot of people go to film school, maybe like at USC or somewhere.
Sure.
Because I really at that point I was starting to understand my nature, at least some realm of it, and
Hmm.
understood the intellectual curiosity is more powerful for me than to learn where to put the camera or the lights or
Right.
some other thing. What people were trying to say with film and how we can talk about it in a class was exciting to me, because that's what I wanted to do. That's what the
Sure.
class said to me. That's what, like they're,
Concepts and conceptual,
yeah,
imaginings that can be brought to life on screen.
right, exactly. And so that's kind of how that started. That was my conduit to it, was this great purity, innocence, inquisitiveness that woke me up one day and said, why do you think those guys are different than you?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, and so I just started pursuing it. And yeah, that's what I did. I started pursuing it. And then it's been a long time. And there were the inevitable, I'm putting quotes, failures that happened to me along the way of that dream. So, I had so many synchronicities that led me to learning and special teachings and things along the way that like no one else was getting, but I couldn't see them,
Mhm.
enough to know.
But
And
you
so
knew, even
I
though they
knew, yeah,
weren't,
I
that you
knew.
were, right? Because it resonated, right? It's
Right.
like,
I
okay,
I
now what do I
under
do with it?
I understood. Yeah, I understood. And I would went out and did some stuff with it and directed some theaters, I awards and all that stuff, and none of it means anything to me. And I got to a point where then I had written some stuff with people and done some things. I was okay making money a little bit doing it, knocking on the door, and um, so I I couldn't get in. Like it just wasn't. I wasn't getting over the top, and I thought, like a lot of people think, well, you have to do it yourself. So
Mhm.
I created this movie, and I worked with the writer and all that. And by this point, I'm married, young children, and I rolled the dice with our money, and I made a little movie. And for the budget and everything, it was a huge success.
Awesome.
Not financially. Got in places, got distribution, won a few awards, but I knew this
There was
wasn't
something
gonna,
more and it didn't quite cut it, right?
and this isn't gonna get me into this business. And I shut that whole side of me down because I hadn't found awareness yet.
Well, and you've also, I'm sure, were astute enough to realize that it was, okay, great idea, poor execution. What did I miss? Not that it was a failure by any stretch of the imagination. It was a huge learning curve in which you found new things that made a difference.
At the moment, I kind of recognized some of that, but I didn't at the moment
Well, sure,
when
because
I
you're
realized,
devastated in that moment.
yeah,
You
and
can't you
so
can't recognize shit at that point.
exactly, yeah,
It's just like, oh my
right,
God, and
yeah,
that's where where we get into that self-deprecating habitual behavior that we've learned from the world that diminishes our own capacity to have that God consciousness that we're supposed to, according to the Vedantic philosophy anyway, of knowing what we're here to do and finding that truth within us and then living it.
right. So that led me to that I'm ever grateful for that not having turned out in a way that I thought I wanted it to,
Mhm.
because it would have never taught me
You
who
wouldn't have learned what you know now, right?
I would not have learned what I know now, and I wouldn't have known who I was still, because I would have still, well, anyway, it doesn't matter because
Well, yeah,
what
you
I,
get caught up in the swirl of success.
right,
Right? And that swirl, it is almost, it can be planar rather than spiral. And for most, it probably is planar because you get into that excitement, the accolades, the ego, and then it goes awry from that point, and you stay where you're at, even though you may be very successful in there. From the internal perspective, there's that next level that you have decided not to reach for yet.
exactly. So there was a long pause where
Yeah.
I had a toe in the business, but I was digging us out financially and doing stuff I really didn't like to do. Wasn't me, but anyway, what you do. I had little kids,
Mhm.
and
However,
always
let me point out something, if you will, that what we do anywhere, we do anywhere.
true.
What I hear from you as you're talking about this is the tenacity that you had of maintaining a structural fit in reality, even though your dreams were a little out of reach, you were still being able to do what you needed to do to meet the responsibilities that you had and still didn't and had that dream still activated in your head, right? It's still intentional to be there. You just weren't able to put all your attention and your interaction with it at the time.
That's exactly it. Exactly it. And I was learning what I wasn't
Hmm.
and what I am. And then so this went on for a while, and I did a couple of little things, but I wasn't really excited about them. There was some music video stuff, just there was little extra work kind of stuff, and kind of kept me into it. But the pandemic put a pause for me and a lot of people,
I did for the world for a
the
short
world.
time, at least
Yeah,
for a few
right.
days. And that's right.
Yeah. But I had this pause, and had grown spiritually a long way to that point. I had started to really understand what I'm doing here. And I always had brought the best of myself to almost anything I did. It was just my
Mhm.
nature, right? So that was a little murky and weird, because you look like you're doing it, but your whole heart's not in it.
Sure. Now, let me ask you, during that period, it seemed to me it would give, I saw a silver lining in it almost immediately when I was talking to Lou and my wife and saying, I really hope that the obsession on hygiene, self-hygiene and sequestration will get people to turn inward and self-examine. Did you find yourself doing that?
I did, but I was already there by that point.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did was it opened up in me a new way to look at my dream, my film,
Mm-hmm.
who what I might do with that. It made me understand some things that um, I always wished I had, in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do, maybe, if I was continuing on without this big pause, because it made me understand that I had always had a passion to say something with film that might be helpful to the world
Mhm.
or to people. Now, not in a grandiose way, not saying that, but my perspective on it was punk rock. I wanted people to see something, that we don't see.
Right.
And it was always that, but that pause made me understand, wow, there's great value in that.
Mhm.
And
Kind of
that,
like, I had discussions with a previous guest, Brady Mick, about our teenage sons, 17 years old, engrossed in video games, right? Both of us were kind of not sure if that's really good or not. And he said, you know what I did? He went in and instead of saying anything to his son about his online behavior, he just went in and watched for a while just to see what he was doing. And Brady's a interior design guy. And so um, he was looking at it from a structural place, and he said, there's all kinds of leadership and group skills, communication skills, critical thinking, all the kinds of things that one would look for in a creative and innovative individual that they'd want to hire, right? And so we've got this probably majority of parents that are probably disgusted because their kids are spending so much time on video games and not outdoors, but they can't really say anything. And yet they still don't understand that there is this additional layer of understanding, skill building, uh, even insight and wisdom that the kids get from interacting with each other in the critical situations they're facing in the games. So it's creating kind of the reverse of maybe what was intended, because the other national deficit in America is critical thinking. Would you agree?
oh, 100%. Yeah.
So this gives this next generation kind of a heads up. They're being trained to think critically, even though we're unaware that that's what's happening. Now, where do we guide them? Where does our older generation, how do we speak to them to help them implement what they see needs to change and can change with their help in understanding the structures and the systems to facilitate that change? How do we impart that knowledge to them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I think about a lot. I have a 23-year-old son who is also doing that, and I've sat and watched like Brady did, and I've recognized a lot in that, and of what you said, and I see it in my son, I see him in his friends, and I realize that for me, being our uniqueness and passing that awareness on is probably a big help in answering the question. Well, that's my
Well,
answer
sure.
to the question.
There has to be a conversation, right? That
Right,
initial, it's like, hey, let's talk about this, right? Have the question
right.
and explore it just a little bit, because we don't have any answers, right?
No,
We
right,
have some suppositions as to how it's worked for us in certain situations. You and what you've done. I taught high school for a while to kind of tune in to see where the kids were at, because my kids were that age at that time. I've got 4, and now I have 6 great grandkids. And I'm estranged, and so there's this desire that I have of being an example for them, even though they may not see it yet. When they start, I want to be impeccable in their eyes once they start being critical enough and want to look, and because you stand up, right? I hope.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's the best that we can do, not get caught up in the anger or resent of it not being available, right? Which I think many of us do.
yeah.
That's not a good path to go down. It doesn't bring any joy or happiness to anyone.
No, and I think also a lot of times when I'm thinking about my children, I also have a daughter who just turned 22. I
Hmm.
think about them, I think, what, who am I to tell them what path they need to be on, even if it's in minute ways? Like you know what I mean? Like I'm not,
Well, I certainly do. That's what our whole movement's about, right? You
right,
do you. We have, nobody has the right to tell you what to do with your body, your mind, your thoughts, your love, your money, your property, right? That's all you, as long as you're living peacefully.
exactly, exactly. And
And
so,
then I deserve that same right.
well, I found it for me, you know, and I'm like, wait, whoa, when I have those thoughts, you
Mhm.
know, about should be doing, and I'm like,
Ooh, that
wait,
word, the should word.
yeah, the
Don't should
should
on
word,
yourself,
yeah,
right?
don't, right, exactly, like, or that this isn't right, whatever, you know, and I say, no, no, you found it, you're
Just
on
be
your
still and
own,
support their
right?
creative energy.
Be an example.
Yeah.
Be an example of someone who lives to their authentic self, who knows that the outcome's not the end.
Because if you
And of
don't, they'll see right through it. And your
course they
words
will.
won't mean shit.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And that's what I mean, that was my childhood.
Yeah.
So why I'm not gonna foist that upon them. I mean, I would, and maybe I did to a certain
Well,
point
we
because
want to. I mean, we're dads, right? We want to best.
we're
We want to
dad.
impart our wisdom as much as possible in appropriate times. However, we should remember as teenagers, it didn't work if we weren't asking the questions, right?
No,
Your parents would try to give us this, pearls of wisdom and stuff. And if we weren't asking questions, it was just right over our heads because we didn't care.
exactly, exactly. So, you know, I mean, I'm just grateful to have these understandings, you know, to have gained them and to understand and look at my conditioning and see where the false narratives that I want to believe when I want to believe them, and then, you know, strike them down when I don't, and just look at what is, I use the word truth. I don't know. Everybody has their own truth, but for me, the truth is that I see through the false narratives, that I focus my inner eye on what isn't real and what's being conditioned out there, and instead of saying, oh, that's so bad and this and that, I can go off and create something that might open someone to a new perspective, and
Right.
they may go down the path
Right.
of
It's not a,
curiosity.
yeah, but it's a yes. And here's, this is what in our movement, there's no prescriptive things. There's one that is, and that's calibrating the law to remove aggression, right? And which in effect is you do you, I do me. And as long as we're doing each other peacefully, not that we're doing each other, but so, from that perspective, there's this opportunity to have some freedom to explore.
Right.
Now, how
And
do we, from that perspective, give ourselves the opportunity to rise above, to resonate with that part of ourselves that wants to step up into something that we haven't achieved yet, know that we can, and are scared shitless of trying. Because there's that fear. That's where the imposter syndrome shows up, right? It's like, oh, I can do this, and then we start telling ourselves the ways that we can't. Well, if we don't know that we can't because we've never tried, then why not give it a chance?
exactly. And so that, I mean, that sums up what has brought me to the point I'm at today, to, like, once I was clear, my authentic self is here to make movies that can open someone to a perspective that is different, even while being very engaging and entertaining and not preachy or anything. Character
Mhm.
pieces that people can just pick out who they resonate with and get something within them that opens. And I understood that, like, it was very clear to me, this is what I don't want to say you're chosen to do, because that's not, I don't believe in that kind of thing, but I understand that that's my truth.
It's frequency related, right? Everything's energy, and the closer you are to the purity of your heart that aligns with your passion, purpose, and skill set, the more you're going to feel that that's truth.
Right.
And you're going to hanker in that and trust it and move toward it further, which creates this, a friend of mine, John English, calls it the momentum tunnel. Right? It's where you've made the choice, you've made the commitment, and are committed because you show up regardless of anything else. Since you've made that commitment, there's no distraction, no choice at that point, except moving forward. And the universe responds by providing everything that you've ever dreamed possible, because you've just created it. And what you're seeking is truly seeking us, because you've thrown your intention out for it to be there. Right? And then we show up, we're like a tesseract, right? We throw the intention out, and then we kind of envelop it as it returns. We don't see that yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that gets me back to the kids, my own kids. They've got to find that experience. Or they're on the search for it, and it's none of my business to be guiding that path. That's not
Except I would offer this: the earlier you can offer that path and nurture them to the place of asking the questions, the more healthy their life will be.
That I'm completely in agreement with, and that's
and
one
we
of
didn't
the
get
things.
that.
No, and I have a further belief in that area, that it would be an amazing world if we go into
How about when
best said, when we go in the world where kids are very, very young and are told they have an authentic self that serves a great whole, and they don't have to do anything about that.
Absolutely.
They just need to
we talked about kids in school, and that I taught. After teaching for a number of years, I saw a lot of things that were missing. So rather than point fingers and like you were doing, right, I created something. I wrote a business plan for a model school / village that was built on holistic education. Now, what's that mean? The parts of that are body, mind, spirit, planet, cosmos. We don't address things that way. The ancients did. We don't today.
Yeah.
So it's not a new age. It's simply going back to our roots and really saying, okay, here's what the essence of that was. Why are we not practicing it? And maybe here's how.
Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. And that's, I understand. So that's what Connected Pictures is about this opening. Okay, so that's the content. That's the movies. That's my thing. That's my art. But I recognize from my years in the Hollywood film industry and knocking on the door and doing little things and all of the stuff, that there's something missing from entertainment and movies that's always been missing, but was maybe done outside of them. And that is a connection between the movie and the people who have watched it. And I realized through technology, I can have a direct connection with audiences and people who are interested in these ideas and the movies and all the stuff, and not in a way to sit and go, oh, the movie, this and that. It's all cool. I like to talk about movies, but that's not
all the swag that goes along with it, right?
Right, and all that stuff or whatever, right? Or who did what and what was it like working with so and so and all this nonsense, right? it's not nonsense. People are interested, but
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm
But figuratively speaking, that it's unimportant as to what we're talking.
exactly, because what's important is how did you feel seeing that movie? How do you feel, and how does that affect what may become of your authentic self, or maybe even thinking about it to begin with? And
Mhm.
how can we together walk the path of this, and how can movies and characters teach you about life that you've never looked at? And
Right,
so
right.
like, so
And that's
there's
another silver lining of COVID, right? It gave us the opportunity to go a little deeper.
right, and to recognize that all this technology came out, maybe was there but not being utilized, that we can connect with people.
And
And
where did, authentic self now is kind of a ubiquitous phrase in the self-development world, right? How recently do you recall that word even being used
not
in that
very, right?
way?
I mean, very recently, I should say. Yeah, it wasn't used until very
I wonder,
recent.
I don't know. I didn't notice it more prevalently used until after uh, well into COVID, as
Yeah,
people were coming out, they're forming the groups, and like the bench, and and that's another place that you participate. You bring your energy there. When a bunch of people bring their energy together in the spirit of cooperation, collaboration, and conversations that are psychologically safe and intellectually humble, everybody has the opportunity to participate, even if it's just listening. Your
and
thoughts are going to be picked up and shared by somebody else because they're there, right? Somebody, and this is a cool thing. Have you noticed this?
yeah, completely. I mean, it's it's actually drove me to want to make movies like this. It was the fact that when I realized this is not about me making a movie and it going to Netflix, even if it's the #1 watched movie in Netflix,
Mhm.
this means nothing to me, because now I don't have any connection to the people who could discuss what I'm trying to put out there and find more in it and move us all forward.
Sure.
If it just sits there,
Well,
runs in
the
the
evidence, of being #1, that would kind of speak for itself. And I know for Luba and I, when we're watching movies that bring things up, I mean, we have tremendously deep conversations, so much so sometimes we have different points of view on things, different perspectives, and it gets kind of tense in some situations. And then we have to realize, oh, okay, we're looking at it from different perspectives. So let's recognize that we're doing that, first of all, and then figure out, can we talk about this perspective together over here? And then let's go over and look at this one, because if you're not having the same perspective, and that's what the conversations bring out, right? Being willing to be vulnerable enough to share what you're thinking and feeling and risk rejection or being misunderstood, and then having the tenacity to not give up and figure out a way to move the conversation and almost sometimes figuring out, okay, wait a minute, where'd the love go?
right.
Right? Because right now I'm feeling like I'm not heard, so I'm not in love. And I'm sure, feels the same way sometimes. And so then being able to hit the pause button, kind of like the COVID, that's a major pause and reflect. And as long as we're able to hit that pause button, reflect in the moment, even be honest with how we're reflecting within ourselves, right? Self-honesty is so huge, and we don't do that
Exactly.
except in deprecating ways.
Yeah, I agree. And then to your point, you do that with your wife when you see a movie, but a lot of people don't know that they may have coffee with their friends and discuss it, or may be trading Netflix lists to watch this, but they don't they're resonating.
Conversations aren't there.
Yeah, and not only just the conversations, like the bigger pieces of what it is, and why it's moving them, and why they would even recommend it, and those things. And so that's exactly when I landed on that, I realized, oh, okay, this is what film has always meant to me,
Well,
and
you know,
now I'm
maybe
able to share
what
it.
you're talking about is the head of cinematography with Perry and having open conversations, reviewing a movie, having open conversation. Maybe that's something that would fulfill your passion to move forward and, you know, create those kinds of environments. And those can be really rich. Do you remember the vision that Barbara Marx Hubbard did? This has been probably a decade ago.
I don't. I know the name, but
Well, the humanities team and
yeah,
Barbara Marx Hubbard
yeah.
put this together, and I held some discussion groups here locally at a Unity church. And there were probably 30, 35 people that showed up, and we would have some really deep conversations. Of course, in that environment, you know, kind of
Yeah.
impossible not to. And yet it gave that chance for people to come together and talk about things and share their perspectives, learn from others, empower each other to grow. Most important factor, right?
Right.
Because that's really what we're after, is just growing and knowing ourselves, and that takes care of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, and that's exactly what Connected Pictures is on the path to doing.
Mhm. Have
You
you
know,
thought about doing anything, you know, or are you a proponent of human design?
I've looked in a little bit about that, but I feel like with all this stuff is, and this rings true with my authentic self, is that I'm not a spiritual teacher outside of infusing my creativity with how I feel about that stuff,
Mhm.
and in that making it accessible and entertaining, because I have the skills and the ability to do that, and then bringing the people together. But part of what we're doing is we're going to have events that are about that, but I'm not leading them. There'll be people
Mhm.
who talk about, you could be there, other people can be there,
The
who
visionary, the idea guy, right? And you build a team
yeah,
around
like
that.
you're right. And well, the teachings will be varied and from people who teach this stuff. And so that's part of the conversation, but and I'm part of the conversation, but that's not
Well, you
my
got to be, right?
area. Yeah, I have to be. I want to be. It's not that. I'm just
Sure,
saying
yeah.
I just share my experience as a way to teach, and my creativity, but others who can help guide people down a path that feels right for them
Sure,
are,
sure.
is
I had an old
are the
friend that
yeah.
he shared a notion with me. He says, "There's no ego without we go." Right? Doesn't mean the ego is negative or anything, because it protects us. At the same time, that we can be damaged by it too. And when we apply it the we go sense, that's a collective, right? And we have to move together at the speed the slowest, or we can't move forward at all in that regard. And we know that, and we don't necessarily practice it. And yet, you know, we're hoping to guide and nurture this world into a new normal. And yet there's still areas that are war torn, have famine,
Mm.
poverty. You know, we don't know how to take care of our brothers and sisters yet. So how can we take care of ourselves? And we don't know how to take care of ourselves. So how do we take care of our brothers and sisters? Right? It's kind of a catch-22
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And the two, as we grow individually, I suspect, will grow collectively and figure out how to systematize things in a different way. Not that the existing systems are bad, they're just mismanaged. We've got, in my opinion, everything we need to have and provide for others in need and bring the standard of living up for everybody.
Yeah.
We just don't
I
do it.
We just don't do it. And yeah.
Now, is that because we can't? Is that
Mm.
because we don't know how? Is that because there are things in the way? I mean, there's all kinds of why.
Yeah.
And at the same time, do we really need to be paying attention to why? Is it not just simpler to say, okay, what needs to be done and let's go do it?
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And for me, what needs to be done is people learning their uniqueness
Mhm.
and and embracing it without trying to do something else.
Or
You know,
projecting your own moral code on another.
right. But also like I say, I make the films, I'll have the conversations, but I know better than to try to teach someone about all these things that I know, that I've learned, that have helped me, because others do it. It's their uniqueness. It's not my
Well,
uniqueness.
self-awareness, right? It's self-awareness,
Right.
not your awareness or my awareness.
No.
It's my awareness about me. That's self. And nobody can teach us anything. We can read books and we can listen to people. We can go to workshops and do all that kind of stuff. However, the insight, understanding, and wisdom comes from our experience.
Exactly. But some people experience, like I've learned a lot from you about spirituality because you share it in books and you have the show and there's right. And
And I
so
got to say, you reshare a lot of my stuff, and I'm so grateful for that. That's caring is sharing. No
yeah,
pun intended, Carey.
well, I mean, the thing about that is, and I had a talk with Dennis Patoko about this because I do that. Whatever resonates with me, I send out, and it doesn't feel like I send a lot of it out. You know what I mean? To share it with other people. It's just that, like, when it hits me, I just share it because that's how we'll learn. Other people can get
Sure.
what I get from you and what I get from the bench or from this or that. And that is my point about creating a space for the conversation and connected pictures, but me not doing that conversation because others do it in a way that people can learn from,
Sure.
right? And I
All right, wizard. Who is
yeah,
that man
so
behind the curtain? Come on
exactly,
out.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, but there is something to that. There are teachings that open people and teachers and people who do that. And I'm
And they're
doing it in
universal, right? We all say the same thing in our own language.
right. And I see that there's 8 billion of us, give or take.
Hmm.
And there must be a lot of different voices because one voice isn't going to resonate or be recognized by 8 billion because we're 8 billion different
Hmm.
situations, different everything. And so the more voices that are talking about their way to this understanding that you and I have, that's deep and can connect with the world and can
Right.
be used to move it forward, is what's important. And so, and there's a lot of people within that are alive now teaching, and there's people who are already gone who are still teaching through their
Oh,
writings or their
absolutely.
wisdom.
Absolutely.
There's all that stuff.
Blavatskys, the Baileys, the Ballards, the Bayard Spalding, and that's just one hand, and there are many hands that we can
Right,
count from on
exactly.
that.
But I think the solution, this is just me and it comes to me deeply, but is in the word awareness.
Hmm.
And I feel like most of the world is unaware, not at for any fault of their own, but that this kind of these kinds of discussions just aren't had in enough places.
They're not aware of their capacity to be aware.
Yeah, their conditioning overrides that. And the conditioning that keeps those conversations out of it is not is controls them. But once they're made aware, then they have
Yeah, can't
places
put
to
that
go.
paste back in the tube.
No, but they also need some ways to look
They need
further
some
and
hand holding,
further it.
right?
They
That's
need to,
it's like, arms are
right,
made for hugging, not for fighting, right?
right, and that can come in a book, and that can come in a meeting, and that can come in many ways from people who their authentic self is to hold the hands of those and bring them up,
Yep.
right? And that is the awareness I had, and that's something
Well,
that
it's the, it's both directions. You're holding someone else's hand. There is someone who's been a mentor, a guide, or many, right, that you always look up to and wonder, well, what would they do in this situation? And you check it with yourself. And then you find out what resonates and you act out, and it's like, okay, that was on spot on. Now, then you extend your hand out to the next person that's in line who's in the same place emotionally or spiritually or whatever, because they're going to resonate to you at that perfect timing where, they just happen to be looking for the hand and yours just happens to be there, right, to greet them. And it's all seemingly magic after a time because it flows so naturally and we become aware of the serendipitous and synchronistic moments and we engage them instead of ward them off as coincidence.
right, but yeah, I mean that's perfectly said. That's a chain of humanity as it's meant to be, in my opinion. But there's some roadblocks, but we will get past that if people.
It's all by design. If we look at when we see things from a design perspective and everything is in its place and shows up at its perfect timing, not ours, right? There's a design that embedded in our genetic code and in our soul frequency that combine for creating our reality through our attention, intention, and interaction. That's kind of law of attraction in a nutshell, right?
Right.
So being able to activate that and live in that brings a sense of awe, of joy, of happiness, of, to quote an old phrase, peace that surpasseth understanding.
True. Yeah.
So what did you find, or would you find, or better yet, even offer as a hint or an insight that others can use for their daily lives in ways that could benefit them?
I'll use the word trust. That word guides me every day in that I understand my authentic self. I have a direction to go with it, to bring it to the world. And I just trust that that is absolutely true. And so I have no outcome necessary.
Or
I have a
expectation.
vision or expect it. I have a vision of where I can go with it and to bring it. And I get up and work on that every day with trust that the right people on the right resources and the right moment by moment thing that's necessary for that path to come to fruition and do what it's meant to do without me putting a label on it.
I'll put a label on it.
Yeah.
Discipline.
Yeah, I
You
meant
got to have,
yeah.
every day, you wake up, you're on, and you don't deviate.
Yeah,
You got to take care of stuff during the day,
yeah.
however, your
Uh,
vision you never deviate from, and you always show up to do whatever's
exactly.
necessary in the moment.
Exactly. And also it's not on my time. So I trust, because sometimes I set out to do the thing that's necessary to do for the next step, or it looks like to be, and there's some kinds of things that are not
It's
lining
like,
up
no,
to
not yet. There's the,
Yeah.
and you notice how we, in that case, since everything's energy, right?
Mhm.
We tend to push and pull subtly and not even realize it until we get frustrated. And then we realize, oh, that's probably not the right thing I need to do because it's not flowing. And the reason I know it's not is because I'm frustrated right now.
Exactly. That happens to me and has happened to me and will continue to happen to me gratefully, because then I'm able to pause,
Hit that
step
pause
out,
button.
and say, not on my time, not in my way, not in what I think it's supposed to be. And what happens? The problem solves itself so quickly that it's, I know that it's part of being human, so I don't do anything about it, and I know I'll continue to do that and get frustrated and want this, but I also know when I don't get in the way, things work themselves out, right? We have this idea in this culture and our
And sometimes
condition.
the frustrations let you know what you need
Right,
because you don't have it.
right,
And you
right.
may not have thought about needing it until it's like, oh, and because you're frustrated because you don't have what you need at the moment. And now you know what more you need.
Exactly. And I mean, I think there's a conditioned way that we go about things. And I say we, I don't anymore. And I know you don't, but most
Well,
humans,
we're still part of us,
we're
right?
still part
So
of us.
we,
Yes, yes. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a global we,
I'm
yeah.
not trying to like,
And
yeah,
it's got its standard deviations, right?
right. Yeah,
There's the bell
exactly.
curves exist.
Exactly. But the thing is, we tend to believe that doing is the answer to every single problem. And my experience is it's the answer to some problems when the doing is from the authentic self. And the other
Being,
problem, what? You're
because you're
being,
being, that
yeah,
I wrote a
being,
book
yeah.
called The God Participle. And for those of you who don't know what a participle is, it is a verb that now ends in ing and can either be used as an adjective or a noun. So you can guess what the God participle is from that, I hope. And if you can't, I'll give you a clue. The answer is being.
Yeah,
Isn't that cool?
that is very cool.
Now, my mother, I credit her, right? She was an English and Lit teacher. She taught me how to play with words.
Yeah, that's it. I love it. I mean, of course I love words, but the one thing I've learned about words is they're all just pointers, right?
Yeah.
They're just pointers. Like they can't quite describe all that's going on in these complex human beings that
Mhm.
we are.
Mhm.
Like they just can't, we can't, even though it's our mode of being, right? What is it, like humans talk, that is their will, I think is a Zen or part of a Zen saying, right? That,
Mhm.
that and we think, but none of the words, and that's what we talk about, can really express it all because we're really complex,
Right. Right.
really complex. And
However, when we learn how, there's a whole array in my experience, there's an array of senses that we have similar to the five, much more finer because we're able to sense the subtleties in just, when we're quiet, we're not thinking, we're open. And if everything's energy, we are sensitive to that because we live in that. We have the capacity to envelop and be enveloped by those moments and really get curious about them as to what all those senses are. Because I know for me, I'm highly intuitive and sensitive. And as a kid, I would feel different things in my body and different places that would feel almost like electrical, like somebody was hit me with I don't want to say a cattle prod, but just a little piezoelectric kind of energy. And then there was a one night where it felt like my tree of life in the body, right? Because it's representative in that, like it was on fire. And it was the weirdest feeling. And yet, knowing that, and then, having to find the functionality between being so frickin' sensitive that I feel everybody and I feel like I got to go hide, to being able to play in that environment with the freedom and ease of trusting it because there's no danger. And there really isn't.
Yeah.
In most immediate environments. There are times where there are, that's not to discount the horrific situations that people find themselves in. Normally speaking, when you're in a group of people, there's no threat. Nobody's going to pull a gun out and shoot you because you said the wrong thing.
Right. And having, just you talking about that just brings up that, it's awareness. It's awareness that there are these other things in you. I wasn't sensitive as a kid like you with the feelings, but I could understand how someone else was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood sometimes when there was fear that didn't need to be there over something that was inconsequential.
Sure.
And you
That's
have
an
these,
example of exactly what I'm talking about.
right?
You had a sense of it. You couldn't understand how, where, why, from whence it came. All you knew was you knew.
Right. And so there's that I have now an awareness that I did that as a child and I do it now. And it's not something that I ever would have known.
No. And
That
it
is
heightens that level of trust you're able to have.
right. Exactly. It's trust in that we are a complex being. And if we have some awareness that we are super complex and we don't understand anything really about what we are, except for through these sensory things, our five and the others, like you say.
We've got a
And
very minuscule lens.
we've had a very minuscule lens, and the lens, when it opens up, starts to make you inquisitive
Change
about,
that aperture.
right. Yeah. Change that aperture and see more in there than what you have already, or what you think you saw.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carey, this has been just an amazing conversation, my brother from another mother. I so appreciate you and what you do and who you are, and the willingness that you had to talk and explore these things that we have yet to do. Right? This is our first launch into this and going the depth that we did, and that gives others the freedom and possibility and maybe even inspiration to have conversations of their own with others.
Yeah, and I appreciate you so much, and you are such a dear friend and a brother from another mother, and you've opened me to so many new ideas, and that's such great for my growth. And that's it. I appreciate being here.
No,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you being here too, Carey,
Yeah.
and thank you.
Right.
And namaste and in la catch. And thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.